They say envy is a slow poison that kills the one who drinks it. But what happens when that poison doesn't just kill you, it binds you to the very nightmare you created? This is the story of two sisters who weren't born from the same womb, but grew up sharing the same heart. Until one of them decided that sharing wasn't enough. She wanted it all. And when she got it, she discovered that some prices are paid not in money, but in blood, tears, and a destiny you can never escape. If you think you know how this ends, you're wrong. In the heart of Surulere, Lagos, where the streets pulse with the rhythm of hustle and the air smells of suya and ambition, there stood a compound that everyone knew. Not because it was grand, it wasn't. The paint peeled like old skin, the generator coughed like an elder with bad lungs, and during the rainy season, the zinc roof sang a chaotic symphony that kept everyone awake. But Compound 47 on Edinaron Ogunsanya Street was known for something else entirely, the friendship between Mmesoma and Chidinma. Those two, Mama Chidi would say, pounding yam in the communal kitchen, they came from different wombs but shared one spirit. I've never seen friendship like it. And it was true. From the time they were 7 years old, wearing matching Ankara styles their mothers sewed from the same cloth, Mmesoma and Chidinma were inseparable. They plaited each other's hair in the evenings. They shared plates of jollof rice, each making sure the other got the biggest pieces of chicken. They whispered secrets under the stars on the balcony, dreams of who they'd become, men they'd marry, children they'd raise side by side. Mmesoma was gentle, the kind of girl who apologized to ants before stepping over them. She had eyes that held kindness even when she was angry, and a smile that made stressed mothers in the compound feel suddenly lighter. She was the peacemaker, the one who settled quarrels between neighbors, who brought medicine to sick children, who never raised her voice even when she should have. Chidinma was different. She burned with a hunger that never seemed satisfied. Beautiful, devastatingly so, with skin like polished ebony and a walk that made men forget their own names. But beauty wasn't enough. She wanted more. Always more. I'm not going to suffer like my mother, she'd tell Mmesoma during their late-night talks. I'm not going to break my back selling tomatoes in traffic. I'm not going to wear the same dress to 3 weddings and pretend I'm fine. I want the life I see on Instagram. The soft life. The luxury. And I do whatever it takes to get it. Mmesoma would hold her hand. God will provide for both of us in His time. Chidinma would smile. But even then, something dark flickered in her eyes, something that said God's timing wasn't fast enough. They didn't know it then, but that hunger would destroy them both. Everything changed the year they turned 25. Mmesoma had just completed her NYSC in Kaduna and returned to Lagos with nothing but a certificate, a heart full of hope, and a job offer at a small NGO in Yoba that paid barely enough for transport and lunch. She didn't complain. That was never Mmesoma's way. One Saturday afternoon, she went to Terraculture for a friend's art exhibition. She wasn't even planning to stay long. She promised to help Mama Emeka in the compound cook for a naming ceremony. But then she collided with someone at the entrance, spilled red wine all over his white kaftan, and looked up into the most beautiful eyes she'd ever seen. I am so sorry, she stammered, trying to dab at the stain with a tissue, only making it worse. The man laughed. Don't worry. This kaftan was too clean anyway. I was starting to look too responsible. His name was Tobi Adioi. 6 feet 3 inches of charm wrapped in old money and new confidence. His family owned one of the largest construction companies in Lagos, the kind that built the skyscrapers in Ikoyi and the estates in Lekki that regular people only saw in magazines. But when he looked at Mmesoma, he didn't see a girl from a Face Me I Face You compound. He saw something that money couldn't buy: authenticity. Gentleness. A spirit unspoiled by Lagos hustle. He asked for her number. She gave it, certain he'd never call. He called that night. And the next night. And the night after that. Their love story unfolded like something from an Hollywood movie, the kind that makes girls sigh and believe in fairy tales again. Tobi courted Mmesoma properly. He met her parents, brought gifts, sat through her father's long lectures about respect and responsibility. He took her to restaurants she'd only heard about: Nkoyo, Shiro, Sky Restaurant. He introduced her to his family, and even his notoriously difficult mother smiled and said, "This one has home training." 6 months later, on a beach in Elash with roses spelling her name in the sand and a violinist playing her favorite song, Tobi knelt in the surf and asked Mmesoma to marry him. She said yes through tears that tasted like salt and joy. Chidinma was the first person Mmesoma called. She. He proposed. "We're getting married." There was a pause on the other end. Just a heartbeat. But long enough for something cold to slither into the space between them. "Congratulations, sister," Chidinma finally said, her voice bright as broken glass. "I'm so happy for you." She wasn't. The wedding was the event of the year in their circle. Mmesoma wore a custom George wrapper that cost more than her father had earned in 5 years. The reception was at Oriental Hotel. The guest list read like a who's who of Lagos society. Banj performed. There were 7 different types of small chops. The champagne never stopped flowing. Chidinma was the maid of honor, standing beside her best friend in a gold dress that caught every light, smiling for every camera. But inside, something was rotten. She watched Tobi look at Mmesoma like she was the only woman in a room full of hundreds. She watched him dance with her, whisper in her ear, kiss her forehead with a tenderness that made Chidinma's chest ache with something uglier than sadness. Why her? The thought pounded in Chidinma's head like a second heartbeat. We grew up in the same compound. We are equally beautiful. Why does she get the mansion in Lekki and I'm still in Surulere? Why does she get the man with money and I'm dating Connor who still borrows transport fare? Envy, they say, starts as a seed. But give it water, the water of comparison, of bitterness, of feeling cheated by fate, and it grows into something monstrous. That night, as fireworks exploded over Victoria Island celebrating Mmesoma's new life, Chidinma made a decision that would curse them all. For the first 6 months, Mmesoma's marriage looked perfect from the outside. She moved into Tobi's mansion in Lekki Phase 1, 6 bedrooms, a pool, a garden where peacocks roamed freely. She had a driver, a chef, and 2 housekeepers. Her closet is filled with designers, Gucci, Prada, local Osoebi that cost hundreds of thousands. Tobi bought her a Mercedes for her birthday. They vacationed in Dubai, Seychelles, and Paris. Every week, Chidinma would visit. They'd sit by the pool drinking Chapman, and Mmesoma would pour out her heart the way she always had. But she never mentioned the bruises. She never talked about how Tobi had slapped her for the first time 3 weeks after the wedding because dinner wasn't ready when he got home. How he'd apologized with a diamond necklace and tears, swearing it would never happen again. It happened again. And again. She didn't mention how his temper was like Lagos traffic, unpredictable and suffocating. How he'd throw things when he was angry. How he monitored her phone, her movements, her friendships. How he'd grab her by the throat during arguments and squeeze until she saw stars. After every beating, there were gifts. After every insult, there were apologies. After every threat, there was love-making that confused her into thinking maybe it was her fault. Maybe she was too sensitive. Maybe this was just what marriage was. She wore long sleeves in the Lagos heat. She covered bruises with makeup. She smiled at the photos Chidinma posted on Instagram with captions like "My sister is living her best life. Crown sparkles #blessed #goals #luxury life." Chidinma saw the mansion. The cars. The designer bags. The trips. She never saw the prison. The obsession grew like mold in darkness, slowly, then everywhere at once. Chidinma started dressing like Mmesoma. She has the same Brazilian hair. She started showing up at events she knew Tobi would attend. She'd laugh too loud at his jokes, stand too close, touch his arm just a second too long. At first, Tobi barely noticed. But Chidinma was patient. She studied him the way a hunter studies prey. She learned what he liked, specific perfumes, certain wines, the way to stroke a man's ego without seeming desperate. And slowly, imperceptibly, she planted seeds. Mmesoma looked tired today, she'd mentioned casually. I hope she's taking care of herself. Marriage can be so stressful. Has she always been this quiet? I remember her being more fun before the wedding. You're so generous with her, Tobi. I hope she appreciates everything you do. Tiny suggestions. Gentle manipulations. Whispers of dissatisfaction dressed as concern. But it wasn't working fast enough. Tobi loved his wife, even if he hurt her. Love and violence can coexist in ways that make no sense to anyone who hasn't lived it. So Chidinma decided to make a deal with forces that don't forgive. Mama Ozoemena's shrine was in Ajumbodi, tucked away in a compound where even Google Maps got confused. Everyone knew her name, but few admitted to visiting. She was a dibia, a spiritual worker whose power was whispered about in markets, in hair salons, in the private conversations women have when they think no one is listening. Chidinma found her on a moonless Tuesday night, clutching an envelope of cash that represented 3 months of her salary. The shrine smelled of incense, old blood, and something else, something that made Chidinma's skin crawl but didn't make her leave. Mama Ozoemena was ancient, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes cloudy but somehow seeing everything. You want another woman's husband, she said before Chidinma could speak. It wasn't a question. I want what should have been mine, Chidinma replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. There is a price. I'll pay for it. The price is not money, child. Mama Ozoemena's voice was like dead leaves rustling. When you bind yourself to a man through spiritual means, you tie your destiny to his. His rise becomes your rise. His fall becomes your fall. His curse becomes your curse. There is no divorce in the spirit realm. What the river takes, it keeps forever. I don't care. I want him. The old woman studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, a smile with too many teeth. Then let us begin. The ritual required Chidinma to bring 3 things: a photograph of Tobi, a piece of clothing that belonged to Mmesoma, and her own blood. She got the photo from Mmesoma's Instagram. The clothing, a silk scarf, she stole during one of her visits, slipping it into her bag while Mmesoma was in the bathroom. The blood, she gave freely. Mama Ozoemena mixed it all with things Chidinma didn't want to identify, chanting in a language that predated English, that predated Yoruba, that came from a time when the gods walked among men and demands always required sacrifice. It is done, she finally said, her voice exhausted. Within 7 days, his heart will turn from her to you. But remember, this binding cannot be broken. Not by prayer. Not by fasting. Not by any pastor or imam in Lagos. You wanted him. Now you will have him. Forever. The word forever should have scared her. It didn't. The change happened exactly as promised. On the 5th day after the ritual, Tobi came home and looked at Mmesoma like she was a stranger. Like something that disgusted him. Like someone he couldn't remember why he'd married. Pack your things, he said, his voice flat, emotionless. What? Tobi, what's wrong? What did I do? I don't love you anymore. I don't know if I ever did. This marriage was a mistake. Tobi, please. Get out. He grabbed her by the arm, dragged her to the door, and threw her out of the mansion she'd called home. Her bags followed, expensive clothes and shoes landing in the driveway like garbage. The gate closed behind her with a finality that sounded like a coffin lid. Mmesoma stood on the street in Lekki, in the dark, calling everyone she knew. But Tobi had already told people she'd been unfaithful, that she'd stolen from him, that she was mentally unstable. No one believed her side. Except Chidinma, who picked her up, held her while she sobbed, and whispered, "I'm so sorry this happened to you, sister. But you're strong. You'll survive this." All while hiding the smile threatening to break free. 2 weeks later, Lagos social media exploded. Tobi Adiwai had remarried. Quietly. At the Ekoi registry. No big wedding. No fanfare. His new wife. Chidinma. The same Chidinma who'd been Mmesoma's maid of honor. Her best friend since childhood. Her sister in everything but blood. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that for 3 days Mmesoma couldn't speak. She stayed in bed in her small rented room in Yoba, the luxury life stripped away as quickly as it had come, and stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was what dying felt like. Chidinma moved into the mansion. Slept in the bed. Wore the jewelry. Drove the cars. Posted photos with captions like, "God's timing is always perfect, folded hand sparkles, #new beginnings, #blessed." For 2 weeks, Chidinma felt like she'd won. Then the nightmare began. The first beating happened on her 10th night in the mansion. Tobi came home angry about a contract that had fallen through. Chidinma, trying to be supportive, offered to make him his favorite meal. "I didn't ask you to cook," he snarled. "I asked you to shut up." "Tobi, I'm just trying to." The slap sent her crashing into the dining table. She tasted blood. Felt teeth cut into her lip. "Don't talk back to me. Don't ever talk back to me." He walked away like nothing had happened, leaving her trembling on the floor, trying to understand what had just occurred. "This is just stress," she told herself. "He's under pressure. It won't happen again." But it did happen again. And worse. Tobi's abuse wasn't just physical. It was psychological warfare designed to break her spirit completely. He'd insult her in front of the staff. He'd bring other women into the house and sleep with them in nearby rooms, making sure she heard. He'd lock her in the bedroom for days, only letting her out to cook and clean. He'd wake her at 3 a.m. for sex that felt more like punishment than intimacy. And every time she tried to leave, every time she packed her bags, something would stop her. A compulsion. A force. Like invisible chains holding her in place. She'd reach for the door and her hand would freeze. She'd call a taxi and forget how to speak. She'd plan an escape and wake up the next morning having done nothing, with no memory of why. The ritual had bound her to him. Spiritually, emotionally, physically. She was trapped in the life she'd stolen, with no way out. 3 months into her marriage, Chidinma returned to Mama Ozoemena, desperate. "Please," she begged, falling to her knees. "Undo it. Break the binding. I can't live like this." Mama Ozoemena didn't even look up from grinding herbs. "I told you the price. I warned you. But you were too greedy to listen. There has to be a way. I'll pay anything. There is no payment the gods will accept. You asked for another woman's husband. You got him. Now you must keep him. He's killing me. He beats me every day. He humiliates me. Her voice broke. And he beat the first wife too. But you only saw the mansion. You only saw the money. You never asked why she wore long sleeves in the heat. You never wondered why she stopped smiling in photos. You saw what you wanted to see. Please. Please, there must be something. His destiny and yours are one now. When he falls, you fall. When he suffers, you suffer. And child." Mama Ozoemene finally looked at her, those cloudy eyes seeing straight into her soul. "His fall is coming. And it will be spectacular. Chidinma left the shrine with no hope and nowhere to go. She couldn't return to Surulere, everyone knew what she'd done, and the shame was too heavy. She couldn't run from Tobi, the binding held her like a prisoner. There was only one person left. The one person she'd betrayed more completely than anyone. She found Mmesoma in a small apartment in Yoba, teaching at a secondary school and slowly, painfully, rebuilding her life. Mmesoma had gained weight, the healthy kind that comes from finally eating without fear. Her smile, though still scarred, was starting to return. She'd started therapy, joined a women's support group, reconnected with old friends. She was healing. When she opened the door and saw Chidinma, every muscle in her body tensed. "What do you want?" "I need to tell you the truth." Chidinma looked like she'd aged 10 years in 3 months. Her beauty was fading, not physically, but in the way light fades from a room when darkness enters. Her eyes were hollow. Her spirit was broken. "There's no truth you can tell me that will fix what you did." "I know. But please. Just listen." And so, on that small balcony overlooking a busy Yoba street, Chidinma confessed everything. The jealousy. The ritual. The binding. The abuse. The trap she couldn't escape. Mmesoma listened without interrupting, tears streaming down her face, not for herself this time, but for both of them. For the friendship destroyed. For the innocence lost. For the childhood bond corrupted by envy. When Chidinma finished, they sat in silence for a long time. "I forgive you," Mmesoma finally said. Chidinma looked up, shocked. "How?" "After everything I did." "Because unforgiveness is its own kind of poison. You drank envy and it destroyed you. I won't drink bitterness and let it destroy me." She stood up, helping Chidinma to her feet. "But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. You were my sister once. Now you're just a painful memory. I hope you find peace, Chi, but you won't find it with me." "I understand." Chidinma turned to leave, then looked back one more time. "He's going to fall soon. I can feel it. And when he does, I'll fall with him." The dibia said our destinies are bound. There's no escape. "Then I'll pray for you," Mmesoma said. "That when you hit bottom, you land on grace." The fall came 6 months later, swift and devastating. Tobi's construction company collapsed almost overnight. Contracts were cancelled due to shoddy work and missing funds. Partners pulled out. Banks called in loans. Investigations were launched into bribes and shortcuts that had gotten people killed. His reputation disintegrated. His assets were seized. The mansion in Lekki was sold to pay debts. The cars were repossessed. The accounts were frozen. And because Chidinma's destiny was bound to his, she lost everything with him. Her beauty faded as if the years she'd stolen were being taken back with interest. Her health deteriorated, strange illnesses no doctor could diagnose. Her mind fractured, she'd wake up screaming from nightmares of rivers that wouldn't let her go, of old women with too many teeth, of blood that wouldn't wash off her hands. Tobi ended up in a psychiatric facility, his mind broken by stress and something deeper, something spiritual that the doctors couldn't name. And Chidinma. She was bound to visit him. Every day. Compelled by forces she couldn't resist. Watching the man she'd envied become a shell, knowing she was cursed to follow him into whatever hell awaited. Years later, Mmesoma got married again. Not to wealth this time. To a teacher named Chukwumika who loved her gently, who never raised his voice, who held her through nightmares and helped her learn to trust again. Their wedding was small, family only, in a church in Enugu. No social media post. No champagne towers. Just 2 people promising to be kind to each other, which turned out to be the greatest luxury of all. Sometimes, late at night, she thought about Chidinma. Wondered if she was still alive, still bound to her spiritual prison. Part of her heart for the girl who'd once been like a sister. But most of her had made peace with the past. She'd learned the hardest lesson of all: not every mansion is a home. Not every wealthy man brings peace. And envy always comes with a price, paid in full by the one who drinks from its cup. The gods are watching. They always are. And they never forget. They say that on certain nights, people in Ajambody still see a woman at Mama Ozoemena's shrine, crying, begging to be released from a bargain she made in the dark. They say her cries sound like wind through dead trees. They say she's been there for years, unable to live, unable to die, unable to be free. They say her name was once Chidinma. But now she's just a warning, a story mothers tell daughters about the danger of wanting what belongs to someone else. Some prices can't be paid in cash. Some debts last longer than a lifetime. And some chains, once forged in spiritual fires, can never be broken. Not by repentance. Not by tears. Not by anything in this world or the next. Choose your desires carefully. God is listening. And He is always here for us.